Friday update from the league. We are week 15 in the 2025 legislative session. I'm Jim McCauley. I'm the legislative director, and I'm filling in for Executive Director Patty Mulvihill and Communications Director Kevin Toon, who are both in North Bend at the spring conference. We still didn't want to step away from today's meeting because there are still a number of key pieces of legislation out there that we want to bring you up to speed on, and also make sure that you continue on with your advocacy. Before we start, a couple of quick housekeeping issues. First, if you have not done so, please make sure that your microphone is muted. Second, we'll end this promptly at 1 o'clock or before. In addition, certainly update your screen name to include the city that you represent. It kind of helps us as we're moderating these discussions. There are a few instructions for how we do that in the chat, so you should be able to see that, and not too much of a problem. Again, as I mentioned, we have a relatively short but very important agenda coming in today, and I'll do my best to move quickly through that so we can take some questions at the end of this. Here's a quick overview of what we're going to cover for today. So Jenna Jones is going to lead off with House Bill 3962. This is the transient lodging tax flexibility bill. Then Scott Winkles is going to provide folks with an update on Senate Bill 610. This is effectively Measure 110 reform. We've got some additional administrative elements in this that needs to be taken care of. Senate Bill 916, this is also Scott's. This is the extending unemployment benefits for striking workers. And then we're going to round it out with kind of our segment as we kind of go into largely updates as opposed to alerts. And I'll be taking on TRIP 2025. That's a transportation package for this session. And then Nolan Plesha is going to update on an action alert that he had sent out related to BEAD projects. So we're going to stick with the normal Friday call format, hold all questions to the end. And if you don't want to forget while you have a question in your head, feel free to drop it into chat, and we'll do our best to get to those as we move through our format today. As I mentioned, we're well past the halfway point. We have a second chamber deadline coming up in 3 weeks on May 23rd. We've got a final revenue forecast on May 14th. This really is what will set the stage for those final budget decisions for agencies, but also for a number of policy bills that we've been working on and other legislative concepts that move through the session. June 18th is the targeted sine die day. That's a goal that the legislature sets kind of on the front end of this to try to speed things up, and that's why we've got deadlines in front of us to try to meet that date. The actual statutory sine die is June 29th, so certainly before 4th of July weekend is usually the time where they want to get out of here, but we're all hoping with fingers crossed that it's closer to June 18th than the 29th.
Jim, what does sine die mean for folks who don't speak legislativese?
Sine die, Latin, effectively. That is end of session. That's when they leave Salem. That's when we can all take a collective breath. So, a couple of other things I wanted to point out. You certainly hear us bringing it up all the time, but your outreach, your involvement is greatly appreciated. Many times it makes a difference on our ability to represent cities and impacts a lot of those legislative outcomes. Without the involvement of you, we are not going to be as successful reaching the objectives that we have going into the session. And this is played out time and time again over the last several years. Your involvement is invaluable since LOC is a public organization. We don't have PAC money. We're not writing checks for candidates, but we're up against private groups and coalitions that feed campaigns with millions of dollars every year. And we find ourselves up against that wall every time we walk into the Capitol. So with the good grassroots lobbying effort that we've had over the last several years, we're often able to balance out that PAC money. So keep it up. With that, I'm going to move to the agenda, and we will start, as I mentioned, with Jenna.
Thanks, Jim. So I have good news. I shared this last week, but not everyone was on the call last week. But House Bill 3962 is our new local transient lodging tax flexibility bill. It is awaiting a -1 amendment right now, which will be likely heard. We're hearing on May 8th in the House Revenue Committee. So we'll have a public hearing so this bill is dealing with the post 2003 tax and allowing it to be used for tourism impacted services like public safety and community infrastructure. We had a hearing in emergency management, general government, and veterans. The bill didn't move out, our original bill didn't move out of that. That was House Bill 3556. So I'll put the link to House Bill 3556 in the chat because that language will be the -1 amendment to 3962. Hearing on Thursday next week. We need as many people to write letters of support or show up in Salem as possible, so we can try to get this on past the finish line, and build as much momentum as we can. I will be sending out an action alert to city managers and mayors for all cities who have a transient lodging tax later this afternoon with some sample testimony. The link is not live yet to submit testimony, so if you want to write a letter and you just want to send it back to me to submit on your behalf, that's totally fine. I think the biggest things that we always hear from our friends at the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association is some obfuscating who pays the tax. So I think in any type of testimony or reaching out to anyone on House Revenue Committee, being very clear that it is visitors who pay the tax, not the hoteliers who pay the tax. And then talking about just kind of how tourism impacts your community, whether it be in a super high tourist area where you just have a lot of people all the time, or if you're a place that is kind of a stop along the way to a really popular tourist community where you get those impacts as well. So if you want to testify, please reach out to me. In person, please reach out to me. My email is in the chat. Just shoot me a quick note. For folks who are coming far ways or into Salem, I want to make sure that we get you on some panels and make sure you get a chance to go. And if you're going to sign up online virtually, you can let me know. It's always good to know who's going to be there, but that's a little bit more flexible. And yeah, that's all I've got.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Jenna, very much. Are you having any trouble at all getting folks to get TLT support in or contact with legislators?
No, I've already heard that folks since last Friday call have been reaching out to the House Revenue Committee members, especially folks from Bobby Levy's district and Greg Smith's district. I think the other person we're really targeting is Representative Reschke. So if you're in the Klamath Falls area or south of Bend, that's his district. And I think we could potentially secure his vote with a little bit more pressing.
Super. Thanks for that additional call out. Next up, Scott, tell us about Senate Bill 610 and 916.
Happy to. So 610 are the things that related to Measure 110 reform. We didn't really have time for during the short session. So if you recall from the short session in 2024, we had House Bill 4002, which recriminalized the possession of hard drugs in a different way, created deflection programs, created investments in treatment services, and some large looks at sort of our behavioral health systems writ large. We were not able to, given the short timeframes of a February session, which keep in mind only lasts 35 days, to adjust the distribution of resources that was created under Measure 110. This is money that's distributed by what's called the Oversight and Accountability Council. Excuse me, the Oversight and Accountability Council. This is the group that was distributing money to applicants in the 36 counties. There was, I will say, in a lack of profound understatement, tumult with the manner in which those funds were distributed this time. The legislature was not supportive of that. They were not distributing money in accordance with what was done during the short session. And so we have Senate Bill 610, which takes away the decision-making authority of the Oversight and Accountability Council, makes them advisory, and then gives the granting authority to OHA. The bill also creates add some seats to the OAC, to the Oversight Accountability, and this is the group that will be advising OHA on the distribution of 110 money. It did not have a city representative or a dedicated law enforcement representative. AOC got a seat, the Community Mental Health Programs got a seat, the Criminal Justice Commission got a seat, but there was no seat for a city or a public safety representative, so a chief or a sheriff. And so we are working, the bill was up for a work session this week. We've gotten that delayed in order to adjust that membership, and it looks like we were having some progress in obtaining a chief or sheriff or an additional seat there to represent the public safety needs. So if you are talking to, we're probably not going to do, because negotiations are looking good right now, I don't think we're going to do a full alert on this, but if you are talking to your legislators over the weekend, and we encourage you to do so and maintain those relationships, this is a bill you probably want to put on that list and just say this, we do need a seat. Even though it's advisory, we expect OHA to listen to this group, and that advice is going to be meaningful. And we need someone from offering a city public safety perspective to be offering that advice. So that's the 610 summary. Going into, Jim, did you have follow up on that one, or do you want me to just go into 916? I'm just going to go into 916. So we've talked about this a whole bunch this session. This is the bill that provides, would allow striking workers to receive unemployment benefits. This bill sort of change it, puts the thumb on the scale for one side in labor negotiations. We believe the bill will make strikes more likely. It could also impact the bargaining position of cities when we're trying to address these contracts. And as I think you're all aware, cities are in a difficult financial state right now. The bill has had 2 hearings this week. One was an informational hearing, the other was testimony. We expect, my understanding from the chair, there will not be any additional work session hearings on this bill. It'll be going straight to work session. So if you've been talking to your legislators, your House members in opposition to this bill, please continue to do so. We are making some progress. I think there is some resistance, some inertia building up against this bill in the House among the majority caucus. We've got to keep that pressure up. This bill doesn't give cities any additional resources. It doesn't help us provide services. And I think it's likely that this bill will result in the taxpayer subsidizing disruption in their own service delivery. So a very problematic piece of legislation. So I think this might be, hopefully we won't be talking about this bill too much longer, but please keep up that pressure.
Super. I really don't have any additional follow-up. I mean, I think this all feeds the same thing that we kind of started this out with. Grassroots advocacy is important. Keep the contacts up and keep emphasizing, our overall position on this thing, and we'll keep battling on your behalf for sure. So next up, this kind of shifts to me. This is more of an update than anything else. So TRIP 2025 transportation package that we've been talking about for the last few weeks. I don't have a physical bill number for you. Realistically, it's probably going to be House Bill 2025. So that's part of their branding effort going forward. The most important message I can offer to folks at this point in time is we've got roughly 6 weeks of work on this. Session is going to start closing up once we get into June. Keep in mind, there's still plenty of time, because when you dial the clock back into 2017, the last time we had a transportation package, that bill was not physically voted on until literally the last week of session, and really the last 3 days of session. So the Joint Committee on Transportation And that leadership group, along with the committee members, have been meeting intensively, trying to come up with a detail on the plan, on what it looks like. You know, the initial framework that was offered was about $1.9 billion of revenue over a biennium. What that translates into for cities is roughly $170 million of additional revenue coming into the system. Now, that's not until year 6 at full implementation, because this is a graduated rollout. They're not flicking the switch on this because they want to have or lessen the impact out there on recognizing that this is going to be an increase in taxes and things of that nature. I will say that when you look at the other states that surround us, California, Washington, Idaho, Nevada, you might be surprised that Oregon probably has the best deal going forward when you buy a new vehicle here. We're nowhere near what other states have in place on the charges. And if you looked at the comparison, literally the lowest state outside of Oregon to license a vehicle is Idaho. And that first time charge is as much as $2,400. Ours comes in at around $500 by the time you go through tax, title fees, and some of the additional fees that are brought into it. So we're going to increase that over a 6-year period, but it's still going to come in well below kind of that next highest state out there for licensing, and is still very much, I think, a reasonable place to be when we're looking at trying to pay for significant infrastructure needs that are out there for cities and counties as well as the state. It is a back to the basics program. Not a lot of money is going straight to projects. About 90% of this new money coming forward is operations and maintenance. And I think getting back to the basics is really important. It's still a multimodal program, so there's still transit funding out there. And there's a lot of rural communities that we're able to set up shuttle service for city to city type of public transit that were never there before. Having those options for transportation remain important, and we're pretty critical throughout all of those roadshow stops. So those elements are all really important. It still matches up with all of the recommendations that the league had as part of our transportation support, that came from the Transportation Policy Committee. So that's all good. One thing I do want to bring up is that earlier this week, the Republican House caucus at this point dropped their version of a transportation package. There is no new money in it. Basically, it's stripping and cutting several different programs and then taking the balance of that funding and pushing it out into, I'll just say, more of a road use type of with the funding. But what they've done, or what they're recommending, is the STIF program. So that's your statewide transportation improvement fund that goes to transit, taking all of that money, $300 million plus, and repurposing it. They also have a number of other things that would be eliminating passenger rail investment, as well as bicycle and the bicycle pedestrian program, which is really important for a lot of folks. There are some elements in this that are probably worthy of consideration. I think looking at unused office space, I think reallocating some vacancies of staff, ODOT staff, and also some other elements related to, I'll just say, efficiencies. And I think those are fair. I think that's something that the committee is going to take a serious look at. But stripping out money for public transit when it still is incredibly important for a lot of communities out there, from our view, is not the way to go. So stay tuned for additional communication from us on the transportation package. I have several cities out there right now who are already pushing out op-eds on this. If you need any help with what those op-eds could look like for your community, let me know. I sent out a bunch of material here this last week or so. So that communication that you can offer, as well as possibly some tours for your local media and things of that nature to talk about the importance of that state highway fund in your community, because again, that's 50% of those revenues are going to local governments. So you can make the case in your community that your vehicle drivers or your constituents are going to guaranteed get some of that revenue coming back in to your own local governments for your own street maintenance as well as operations. And I think that continues to be a critical point to make. So that's it for me. I'm going to follow up and we'll finish with Nolan Plesha to talk about BEAD projects. So Nolan.
Hey, Jim, you
Yep.
might need to call an audible here.
Okay.
Nolan got called into a legislative meeting that is
All right.
going long, so meeting with the legislator.
Okay, so I'll take the audible on this. I will do my best to kind of walk you through it. So the BEAD program has always been pretty important for local governments in terms of how broadband is rolled out. Nolan, thank you for saving the day.
I'm so sorry. I'm guessing you got to my little piece.
Just a
I was in
quick introduction. It's all yours.
thank you. My apologies. I was in a work group trying to protect our right-of-ways along with other city folks that were there. So thank you, everybody. So I don't know what Jim said, but quick recap, at least on B, this is the federal funding that brings close to $700 million for broadband infrastructure to unserved and underserved areas throughout the state. This has been a very long process. Part of that process, as we were developing the scoring criteria, we successfully fought for and included specific criteria that would allow extra points towards scoring your application if you can show that you're working with local governments. I had heard last week and more this week that cities were starting to receive inquiries from some providers, specifically one that I was hearing about saying, hey, can we get a letter of support for our BEAD project? I think there was confusion about whether or not that was to support schools in the school district specifically. I think part of that was just how they were framing the conversation. And the reason they're using school districts is the state had to come up with a way to define territory for where these grant applications could be created to make sure that we are actually serving all the unserved and underserved areas. They looked at counties, they looked at different regions. Ultimately, they settled on school districts as a nice, small, but big enough area that would allow us to actually get to as many of the unserved, underserved, broadband serviceable locations throughout the state. They now call them district grant areas, not school district areas, to try to avoid that confusion. But I know a lot of them are reaching out and saying school districts. So I sent out an alert yesterday to city managers, administrators, recorders, and public works directors. So some of you on here may have received that email and some of you may not have. I probably could have been a little more clear in my call out, but basically was cautioning folks from immediately signing on, and I probably should have used that term immediately. But my point was I want to use this opportunity to spark a relationship between your city and a provider that is looking to come serve your community. What I didn't want is for this to be an opportunity to check the box to say, hey, we worked with local governments, now give us our extra points so we can proceed in a build. I've seen and heard too many instances where some providers are not paying their franchise fees. They are damaging local property, and some are very difficult to work with. So I wanted to use this opportunity for cities to really encourage those providers to reach out and talk to you about these projects. What kind of expectations are going ahead, but for you all to still feel free to say, great, we've had this initial conversation. We are going to move forward with this and work together. We'll sign your letter of support. There is a deadline for providers to get these letters of supports by May 22nd. So if you have received outreach from a provider, what I would encourage you to do is see if you can set up a quick meeting. It can be a phone call, in person, whatever works best, to just have them tell you what is their plan for your community and surrounding area. what are those expectations that you as a city expect throughout that process. And if you feel comfortable, sign that letter for them. You may have multiple providers that are going to want to apply for a grant in your area. Feel free to sign multiple letters because you don't know who's going to actually ultimately receive that grant. So my big thing is I want to encourage them to develop these relationships with your community so we can build good partnerships as we are receiving all this money and building out into our communities.
Super. Thanks very much for that rundown, Nolan. And I think that the message that Nolan articulated here was really important. That relationship building is going to be really important going forward with these BEAD funds. And we end up working with an awful lot of different folks that provide those types of services, and some do a really good job with building relationships. And we have others that may not be characterized as doing a really good job. And we just want you to make sure that you work those relationships and understand that you have decision-making authority here and can get a decision that makes some sense for your community. So that concludes our presentations from the lobby staff today. So as I said earlier, if anybody has a question, you can either raise your hand or drop that into chat, and we'll do our best to go through all of the Q&A. If we brought up an issue that was not identified in the summary today, we can certainly address it. And I'm going to take one of them first. I actually did drop the question into chat. There's a question from Matt Straight with Millersburg about Senate Bill 974. This is the shot clock bill, and I'll just say potentially added liability bill that we're faced with, and we've been fighting this thing for weeks. The unfortunate part for us right now is it made it through the Senate with a 29-0 vote, despite the objections from the league and from many other partners around the table that felt that this was overburdening and not going to get you any closer to building the type of housing stock or any kind of housing stock that you thought it was going to do. So there is a hearing scheduled in the House Committee on Housing and Homelessness on the 5th. We're prepared for that hearing. An awful lot of work going on behind the scenes, really focused in on trying to reduce the impacts of these shot clocks, as well as the increased liabilities that cities may face if they're forced to approve permits and things of that nature. So definitely for those of you who have significant concerns, which we haven't talked to a city that doesn't, keep up the communication. And I would be zeroing in on that House Committee on Housing and Homelessness if you've got any members there, and continue to articulate your concerns. But know full well we're doing everything possible on our end to try to have an impact on this final outcome. I'm looking for hands and I'm not seeing anything, but there is a question in here from Michael in Gladstone. Nolan, this is for you. Are there major providers, Comcast, opposing the subsidized broadband for underserved areas? Oh, I see you answered it, but yeah, go ahead and take it as well.
Yeah, might as well do a full answer for everyone to see or hear. No, they aren't opposing these. They actually may be applying for some of these grant opportunities. So you actually might see asks for letters of support from them. I did talk to their lobbyist as well yesterday about that. And just again, I'm encouraging providers as well as all of you just to connect, have that conversation, and make sure they're working with you.
Thank you for that. Any additional questions? Again, like I said, feel free to drop these into chat or just raise your hand and we'll get you on. Okay. Going once, twice? Oh.
Supposed to be going.
Actually, before we go, Scott, were you able to come up with a question that came into chat over union dues?
So I think the bill, Diana, I think the bill you're referencing was 2886, and it would have allowed employees to non-union employees to contribute to their labor unions. The bill never got a hearing. It stayed in committee past the deadline. So not sure what the entire story was there. It was dead when I got there. So
No, if you can hear me, this is Diana Moffett.
yeah.
The question about, remember the individual kind of lawsuit for an employer who failed to provide the collected union dues to the union.
Oh, 2944.
That's it.
Yeah, they took the private right of action out of that bill. So there's no lawsuit. So it got a hearing work session. It'll be amended significantly next week. And so that's where it's at now. The labor did give us a list of cities who were apparently not turning out. It was the quarterly reports that they were not getting. So there were 3 cities, and we're working with those cities to resolve it and sort of ground truth whether that's what was described as was the situation from their perspective. So
All right. Thank you. I'll keep it on my radar.
yeah,
And hopefully it'll still go away.
it's not going to go away, but it's going to look different.
Thanks for taking that question, Scott. I was going to hit on too, and Scott already answered it as well, the question about tracking bills and whether or not we had a dead bill list. You know, we don't, whether it's superstition, paranoia, or whatever, we don't like to publish that or send that because at any given time, even though you pass some of these deadlines, bills can be resurrected for a number of reasons. I'll tell you the full sheet effectively. There's 3,400 bills that were introduced right now. We were tracking around 1,500 of those bills. Since the first chamber deadline, that's dropped by about a third, roughly. We'll see what it looks like once we get past the 23rd here for second chamber. What's kind of crazy when you think about it, when you look at the other Western states here, California's bill list for the current session, less than 1,000. Washington State, less than 1,000. So we seem to have a propensity to generate an awful lot of legislation that comes into this system, and it's prompted actually the legislature to actually take a look at a bill this time around to limit for full session bills to confine it to 25 per legislator. That would still push it over 2,000, but it's no fun trying to look at 3,400 bills and trying to figure out which one of these things have got legs. And it's really actually had a pretty significant impact this year on Legislative Fiscal Office and other LPRO offices trying to stay on track and trying to get fiscals out, et cetera, et cetera. So fingers crossed that they're going to take a serious look at this going forward. One bit of good news I definitely want to let folks know. We always maybe want to try to end this call with some additional good news, and that is Senate Bill 179. This is the rec immunity bill. Went 30-0 on the Senate side, and Scott, if I'm not mistaken, this thing is up for work session on the 7th.
Yeah, 2 updates here. It is up for work session on the 7th. We feel like we're in really good shape. And in excellent news, last night, the jury in Newport v. Fields returned a verdict for the defendant. So the city of Newport prevailed, and they found that they prevailed on the rec immunity defense and on whether there was negligence. So great news there. Still need the bill. It's still in good shape.
Thank you. Looks like also want to try to cover a quick question in the chat about shelter framework. So that ongoing discussion is ongoing at this point in time, trying to get some of the details of how that's going to go. A lot of our focus at this point in time is trying to figure out how much. They've slated, I'll just say initially, around $217 million for gap funding at this point in time. But we've got to find more details and more data so that we're a little bit more accurate in these estimates on the shelter funding needs that are out there. So Alexandra Ring, who's not available for this call today, has been communicating and with a number of cities who have got active shelters in place that you've been funding for several years. And we need to get that information to Alexandra Ring so she can continue to build the case for that shelter funding. This is going to be potentially a pretty tight budget process. We still have some unknowns on what the impacts are going to look like from federal money coming in to the system and how that is going to relate to the overall budget decisions that are made before the end of the session. So there was also a question in here on condo defect. I unfortunately don't have a lot of direct knowledge on this thing other than it's up in Senate Committee on Housing and Development on Monday. So I think it's actually got some pretty good legs, going forward. It's obviously already made it through the House. So the Senate is going to be taking this thing up. And I don't honestly know, I couldn't tell you if there's going to be more tweaks or what that outcome looks like. But again, I think that's going to be a pretty good space going forward, because I think realistically to really try to tackle that full market of housing needs, we need to see more condos in that ownership structure, and being able to deal with the defect overlay that we've had in this state for decades will, I think, be helpful and hopefully prompt more builders to take a look at that, because I know they've certainly walked away from it in the years. Okay, just checking one last time for any other questions. All right, I'm not seeing any. I'm gonna let you folks get part of your noon hour back here today. Again, thank you very much for joining us today. A lot of great questions. Really appreciate the interaction. And we'll be back here again next Friday, same time. And have a good weekend. Today's Cinco de Mayo, or actually next week is Cinco de Mayo, but plenty of Cinco de Mayo activities coming up over the weekend. So enjoy yourselves, and hopefully you'll have some sunshine where you're at.